So if you're wondering how to actually put more effort into language learning and how to actually get more done effectively when you have a busy schedule, you've got a job, you've got life constraints and all that kind of stuff, that's basically what I'm going to explain in this video. So language learning for busy people, let's go. First of all, we need to actually identify what the problem is clearly, because it's not exactly what you think. It's not as simple as you're busy so you can't learn a language. So here is you, and this is basically what you think the amount of time would be that you would need to properly learn a language. So this is basically, you think, okay, I need this as a minimum or I'm not actually going to be able to make progress in a language. Then this is what you perceive that's a clock, by the way. It looks a little bit like an L in a circle. I've tried to draw a clock. This is essentially what you view the current amount of time you have, and it's got to cross through it because you don't think what you have is enough time. It doesn't match this. It's not enough to learn a language. Therefore, you think, I don't have time to learn a language. Now, there's a few things to unpack here because it could be the fact that you really don't have that much spare time, or it could be that you are able to free up more time, or it could be that you're simply perceiving the amount of time you actually have wrong. So now that we know this is effectively what the problem is, let's actually unpack it and talk about the potential solutions. So there are basically three solutions when it comes to being more time efficient and finding time to learn a language. So one, you can change your perception of the amount of time you have. Two, you can free up time. And three, you can increase your time efficiency. And you don't have to do all three of these. Obviously, you would need to do at least one if you want to make some progress. But what all three of these things do is they basically allow you to do more in the current situation you have by, just changing some variables. And that's what we're going to talk about now. We're going to go through all three of them, and at the end you can kind of decide which one's going to work best for you. And I've got some actionable steps for each one. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the perception. As you remember from here, this is basically your perception of how much free time you have. And that's so important because beliefs are the laws that govern our reality. And if you perceive that you don't have that much actual free time, you're basically kind of making your own success and your own progress illegal because you don't think you actually have the required resources to pull it off. So the first thing we're going to do is actually take stock of how much time we have. This is something, I don't know if Ali Abdaal called it this, but this is something Ali Abdaal, he's kind of like a famous productivity YouTuber. You probably heard of him. If you haven't, I'd highly recommend you check his channel out. But basically he talks about taking stock of your time, actually seeing what you spend your time on. And this is really good for freeing up time and basically planning your week out and being organized. So everyone has 168 hours in the week. And what I want you to do now is to actually list your non-negotiable weekly tasks and decide how much time they take up. So obviously the number one thing you should start with is sleep. Then you've got work and then meals. And then you can also write down all your chores that are going to take up time. Maybe it's, I wouldn't really call exercise a chore, but we can throw it in there. Cleaning, cooking, mowing the lawn, etc. And then fun stuff that you want to add time for. Maybe it's watching a movie a few nights a week or something like that. Basically put in all the things you do, and we're also going to establish how much time they take up. So these numbers aren't exact, I've just put in numbers, but for example, if we're spending 9 hours in bed a night, that's obviously 9 times 7 is 63. I put in 50 hours for work. If you work 40 hours and you've got a fairly strenuous commute, commute just means like driving to work if you didn't know. So I've just put in 50, and then I'll put in like, meals 21, that's 3 hours a day. These are pretty big numbers as well. I think most people don't sleep that much, don't work that much, and don't spend that much time eating, but who knows. And then you can basically put in all the numbers for how much time you have. In this hypothetical example, it's 152 hours, so that basically means 168 hours, which is the total amount of time in a week, minus 152 leaves us with 16 free hours. So even in this kind of jam-packed week, that's 16 free hours of time that we technically have, that we're probably wasting between tasks, swiping on our phones, just doing some, rubbish where we could actually be doing productive stuff. So now that we can actually understand and we can perceive that we do have 16 free hours, that leaves more than 2 free hours a day that we could easily spend some of that time learning a language. So yeah, we could easily designate 5 hours a week to language learning because we have 16 free hours. But yeah, we'll talk a bit more about using time efficiently later, but this exercise is really, really good for showing you how much time you have. It's also good for knowing what you can kind of get rid of, which we'll talk about on the next slide, freeing up time. But yeah, I would highly recommend you do this right now. Pause the video, get a pen and paper, and actually work this out. Or you can do it after the video simply because it is hyper useful. But yeah, number 2, free up time. So what you can do as well, which I think everyone can do, even me to some extent, is to actually free up time or cut some stuff. So either if maybe you don't have a lot of spare time, even adding all your things together, you're like, okay, I'm basically at 168. I really don't have that much spare time. Or you really just want to cut some stuff, even if you do have spare time, to give yourself more free time. I need to stop clicking the screen and go to the next slide. Sorry. Either way, you can easily free up time. And I think there's basically four ways. There's basically four ways that you can free up time. So you can either cut entire tasks, you can trim tasks, you can move tasks around, and you can combine tasks. So if we were cutting entire tasks, for example, it might be maybe we I'm trying to think of a random example that is not going to be detrimental to anyone's life. Maybe we, for example, vacuum the house twice. I don't know. I'm just going to give an example. I don't care if it's not realistic. You can just kind of figure out what you could cut in your own life. Maybe we vacuum the house twice a week. Maybe we can go down to 3 times a fortnight or something like that. That would be an example of cutting. That wouldn't even really be an example of cutting a task, sorry. That'd be an example. Cutting a task would be like picking something you do, like, for example, I don't know, this chore that you could completely cut out somehow. I don't think it's really realistic with chores. It would have to be for something you don't particularly enjoy. Maybe you're learning an instrument and you absolutely hate it. I'm not saying give up on an instrument if you enjoy it, but if you absolutely hate something you're doing, you could easily cut it out and replace it. Trimming tasks is basically reducing the amount of time you spend doing them. So that would be like what I said before. If you could go from vacuuming twice a week to 3 times a fortnight, or if you could reduce the amount of time you spend doing tasks. So for example, if you're spending 21 hours a week on meals, that's 3 hours a day. I think you could easily cut that down to 2 hours a day just by eating quicker and not maybe consuming content at the same time, not slowing yourself down. Potentially, if you could cook all in one go, you could also reduce the amount of time you spend eating. That would be an example of trimming tasks. You can also move tasks around to make them more efficient. So potentially, if you want to if you put all of your kitchen cleaning stuff adjacent in your schedule to when you're cooking, it's all in the same spot, so that could potentially save time. These are just random examples. It's hard to think of examples just because everyone's life is so different. But yeah, if you can figure out the best way to move tasks around to actually be more efficient, then yeah, I think we kind of talk about that a bit on the next slide. But yeah, that is another good thing. And then combining tasks. I'm not talking about habit stacking specifically, although again, we will talk about that on the next slide because there's a lot of things on the next slide. But combining tasks is basically putting things together to do it more efficiently. So for example, we could combine mowing the lawn with doing some other kind of outside work that potentially we could do quicker by doing it at the same time than by doing them separately. Just that kind of thing. Basically look at this list and think about ways you can do stuff. The most probable thing is probably trimming tasks. That's probably the easiest to implement. But yeah, you can actually save a lot of time and you can add that to your free time and then decide where you're going to invest it. Maybe it's language learning. Who knows? The third thing we're going to do, which I think is really, really good, and even if you're going to pick one of these things, I'd highly recommend you choose increased time efficiency, because everyone can do this, including me, and I am leaps and bounds better than I used to be, and I'm still not even halfway to as a time efficient as I could be. So specifically with language learning, we're trying to increase our output per unit of time. If you think about output as like the results of what you're getting, we're basically increasing the amount of output we get per unit of time. So we're getting more output. And the way we do this is by increasing our time efficiency. So a few ways we can be more time efficient is through, I'm going to start with habit stacking, even though it's the second thing. We've talked about this a lot. Habit stacking is basically combining 2 habits. So for example, if you're exercising or doing chores or driving in the car, you could very easily chuck on a foreign language podcast or something like that to get a little bit more kind of exposure in. You could also watch stuff while you're eating. You can combine a lot of different habits, but listening stuff is the easiest to combine. So that easily, instead of having to free up time, you can actually just chuck a habit like listening to something on top of another thing, and that actually gets you more kind of bang for your buck without even having to take up more time. The next thing you can do is routine, which I'd highly recommend everyone have. You should have a rough habit tracker or some kind of thing that you need to do every single day for the language you're learning. And you should just have a rough idea of when things are happening in your day, like when you're sleeping, for example, when you're working, and you can just plan out your weeks in advance. I find that really, really useful, and I'm surprised that a lot of people don't do that. Task placement as well is good for time efficiency. So for example, if you're doing flashcards before you go to bed when you're tired, or maybe as soon as you wake up when you're drowsy, you're not going to obviously get them locked into your brain as much because you're less focused, you're not particularly alert, etc. So The way we can kind of control task placement is a lot of the time with how alert/drowsy we are and our dopamine. So, for example, you want to be doing something like flashcards that requires memorization when you're in peak alertness. So, although I do recommend eating the frog, which basically means doing the most difficult task first, that doesn't necessarily mean waking up and doing it when you're kind of groggy, just because you might not get that much return on flashcards if you're groggy, as opposed to maybe literally just waiting 15 minutes, going outside, having a cold shower, having a coffee, and then you're way more alert and can actually get more of a return. And this is specific. This is very different for different people. For me personally, I wake up, I get out of bed ready to take someone's head off, so I'm pretty much alert straight away. Some people take like hours to wake up properly, so you kind of, you know if that's you. You kind of just have to judge how you are. As far as drowsiness goes, good things to do to make you actually drowsy are, for example, reading before bed or listening to a low dopamine audiobook in a foreign language. I find that can put you to bed, and if you don't understand a lot of it, the benefit is it'll put you to bed even faster, so that's kind of a good thing. And then dopamine, if you're watching, for example, a TV show in a foreign language, that's kind of like high dopamine as well, so you could potentially have that as a reward after something else you don't particularly enjoy. Maybe if you don't particularly enjoy exercise, but you're like, okay, it's 2025, I need to get in shape. You could say, okay, if I go for a run, not only can I habit stack and listen to a foreign language podcast while I'm running, but I can also, okay, as soon as I do the run, I can get home, I can have a shower because I'm going to go, and then I can sit on the couch and watch an episode of this show, which I actually enjoy. Just things like that to kind of make you a little bit more excited in your life. I think living your life to prioritize excitement within reason can be beneficial to making progress in things. So yeah, just control if you've got like a fun habit, like that kind of thing. Put it after something difficult, I think. And overall, the message is just to be more organized, to cut out rubbish, constantly innovate your system to boost your output and your happiness. Guys, if you are looking to learn a language, I'd highly recommend you check out the Language Learning Accelerator in the description. It's my course I've built for you guys. It's on a very, very severe discount at the moment with a bunch of free bonuses, and you're welcome to jump on call with me as well to discuss it. I will actually help you personally, so I definitely recommend you check that out. I've also got my Discord in the description, which is completely free, and you can hit the subscribe button if you're not a complete imbecile, because obviously these videos are very useful. But yeah, thank you for watching and have a good one.